Okay, so do you guys consider yourselves a homesteader? Would you like to be a homesteader? Are you aspiring to become a homesteader? So I do consider myself a homesteader. My husband and I, we have this property here that I call our homestead or our farm. But I just want to talk a little bit more about that. Hey friends, welcome to Harvest Moon Farm. If this is your first time on my channel, my name is Nikki. If you've been here before, I thank you and welcome back. And today I want to talk a little bit about why I homestead, why I chose this lifestyle, and why it's important to me. So a couple of weeks ago, I had ordered this book, The Tiny But Mighty Farm. This is written by Jill at Whispering Willow Farm. If you guys have followed her channel, you know who she is. This is a fabulous book. This is talking about how to make even a small farm work for what you want, whether that is to feed your family, whether that is to grow something to sell, whatever that is. That's what this book is about. But at the beginning, she talks a lot about figuring out what your values are, knowing what's important to you, and only doing things that align with those values and those things that are important to you. So after I went through it, and you can see that I've got about 1 million pages bookmarked here, I started thinking about why this is important to me. And I realized that if you don't know why this is important to you, you're setting yourself up for not failure necessarily, but you're setting yourself up for a really hard time. So my grandparents had a garden. My dad's parents had a garden as long as I could remember. I think my parents had a garden when I was very little. I just barely remember it. But I did my first garden. My boys were little. I lived in a duplex, had this little bitty backyard that of course I shared with my neighbors. And the first year that we moved in, I decided I was going to create a garden. I knew nothing about gardening, nothing. So I had this little tiny, maybe 6x8 plot, maybe not even that big. And I just crammed it with everything I could think of. Well, obviously that is not the best way to do things. So in the end of that first year though, I got quite a bit. I had tons of tomatoes that I could share with my family and my neighbors and, you know, lots of people. And most importantly, I learned a lot. For instance, there is a difference between a bush green bean and a pole green bean. I didn't know that when I started. I bought pole bean seeds and, you know, they didn't work out very well that first year. So we lived in that duplex for about, I think it was 5 summers. And every year I tried something new. I rotated the things in my little garden plot just because I wanted to get more and different things in it. Not because I knew then that was a good thing to do. I also started a little strawberry patch. I had different things in different areas. And then I started learning how to can. So I checked out books from the library. You know, easy internet access wasn't a thing like it is today. Checked out books from the library. I talked to my grandma. I talked to my mom. And a lot of it was trial and error. So I started out just with water bath canning. That's all I did for a long time. I made jellies. I canned my tomatoes. I canned my green beans. And it was wonderful. I learned a lot. But back then, if somebody said, hey, do you think you're a homesteader? I would have said, heck no. In my mind back then, if you were a homesteader, that meant that you had at least 40 acres. I have no idea where that number comes came from. But in my mind, you had to have at least 40. And you grew all your own meat, and you raised all your own vegetables. You canned and froze and put up everything that you grew. You sewed your own clothes. You butchered your own animals on your own property. You know, basically you lived like Laura Ingalls. That was what I thought a homesteader was then. Now, obviously, that's not the case, and of course now I know better. So I remember as a little girl being at my grandparents', and they would bring in, you know, some of their just gigantic slicing tomatoes from the garden, slice them up still warm from the sun, cover them with my grandma's homemade honey mustard and salt and pepper, and they were just the best things I've ever eaten. I remember my aunt at various times, my aunt and uncle and cousins at various times lived across the street from them, and I remember sitting on their front porch, us kids, and we were helping them shell peas or snap beans. And you know, I don't remember a lot because I was young, you know, maybe 6 or 7, 8, somewhere in there, but I do remember enough to remember have those little flashes of memory. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I have memories of being at my grandma's house, and all of us kids were playing, and my grandma and my mom and my aunts were all canning and processing and putting up all the harvest, helping my grandma put up all the harvest, because, you know, we all ate there a lot. She shared with us, so of course they were helping. So one thing, I don't know if that was something that my grandparents truly enjoyed, the gardening and the preserving and all of that. I'm assuming they did, but I don't know if they really did, or if it was just something that they did because they were young children. Well, they were children and teens through the Great Depression. So, you know, that's what you did. You saved everything that you possibly could. You grew everything you possibly could, and you preserved it all because you didn't know if you were going to have anything. So you know, throughout the years, I really, really enjoy all of this. I love having my own garden. I actually love the process of preserving and canning, and I guess preserving in whatever method that you preserve, more than I enjoy being in the garden, but I do enjoy being in the garden. Less so when it's 112 degrees, but I think that's probably all of us. But I also really enjoy all of the new things that I've started trying and that I've been learning about in the last several years. So the last year that we were at our old house, I should say our previous house, we had a flock of backyard chickens, and you know, they were laying eggs, and it was great. I thought it was wonderful. I loved it. I love sitting on the back porch at that house, sitting on the back porch and watching them run around in their pen and listening to them just squawk and cluck, and I just loved it. It was very relaxing to me. And now, of course, we have chickens that we raise for eggs. We've also, starting last year, we started raising our own meat chickens, and we've got a flock of meat chickens out. They've got about another month before they'll be ready for processing. We've got our little goats that we're going to be breeding with the intention of then having some dairy, and then we'll have some baby goats to either keep or sell, whatever we decide to do. Eventually we'll probably sell some because we don't want to just keep all those babies. Well, I could. My husband probably disagrees. But, you know, now that we have the space, I want to continue growing, I want to continue expanding the things that I can do to make our family more self-sufficient and to provide us better, healthier food. So we want to get piglets at some point and raise our own pork. I'd like to get a dairy cow. I'd like to raise beef at some point. But, you know, you can't just, well, I guess if you had unlimited funds, you could just jump in with both feet, because you could hire people to help you and all of that. But most people don't have that that sort of access to money. So we're adding slowly as we, you know, build up the infrastructure that we have on our property. So we'll need to build a place for pigs. We'll need to build fences and a barn and other things to have some of that larger livestock. But that's important to me, is to continue doing all that stuff. So, you know, and so that's a big part of my why. Yes, I enjoy it, but more importantly, especially over the last few years, as I've gotten older, I realized that the things that you get in the grocery store, even though that's how I grew up. I mean, yes, we grew up eating things from my grandma's garden, but my mom didn't really garden. And that was fine. You know, we bought our food at the grocery store and it was fine. But, you know, that was years ago. And things now, I don't know if you guys feel the same way I do, but if I can avoid buying food at the grocery store, if at all possible, I want to. All of the hormones and the antibiotics and the, you know, whatever they've got in our meat that you buy from the grocery store, you know, from a commercial grower, the pesticides and the other things that come on our vegetables, I don't want that stuff. I don't want it for me. I don't want it for my husband. I don't want it for my kids, and especially my grandkids. They don't have anything else. You know, that's how. So I'm sort of aging myself here, but things changed a lot from the time I was a child to the time I became an adult. So, you know, when I was a child, a lot of people gardened. And yes, a lot of people garden now, but I feel like it's something that's kind of coming around again, and has been for several years. But I don't know. Anyway, it's very important for me to have the food that I know how it was grown. I know how it was raised, not only for me and for Joe, but, you know, my grandkids. And they're going to live their lives the way that they want to live them, as they should. But, wow. But I want to know that when they come to my house and I feed them, I am feeding them with the food that's the healthiest and the most organically and sustainably raised that I can. Now, does that mean I don't ever take them to McDonald's? No, of course not. They're kids. They love McDonald's. We take them to McDonald's. I buy them cookies or candy sometimes. But if I'm going to make them food, and I try to cook more often than we do anything else, I want it to be something that's good. So my grandson that is 6, his favorite thing to eat when he comes to our house is eggs. He'll come over. It doesn't matter if he ate on the way to our house. He walks in the door and he says, "Grandma, can you fix me some eggs, because your eggs are the best eggs in the world." Now, part of that is the 6-year-old praising his grandma, but part of that is because he really likes the way they taste. So, you know, I like for the kids and grandkids to be here. I really enjoy having them all here and feeding them all. So anytime I can feed them something that I grew or something that I raised, that is what makes me the happiest. So I'd like to be as independent from a grocery store or a big box store as I possibly can. Now, there are things that I'm not willing to give up, like toilet paper. So of course I'm always going to buy toilet paper. I understand there are other ways that you could deal with that, but that's not something that I am willing to do. So I will buy things like that. But, you know, when it comes to our food, that's different. I want to make sure that we're getting the best possible food that we can get. So that's part of my why. That's very important to me. And one of the reasons that you need to know what your why is, know why you want to live this way, know what the important parts of that for you are, is because there are a lot of bumblebees out this morning. You need to understand that, and you need to know that, because at some point you will experience some sort of loss. Maybe it's not huge. Maybe you had a very dry or a very wet summer and your garden didn't produce a whole lot. Well, in today's world, for most people, that's not a big deal. Here in the United States, that's not a big deal. If you didn't get any tomatoes in your garden, you can go to a farmer's market. You could go to the grocery store if you have to, although tomatoes at the grocery store are not necessarily the best. But if your garden didn't produce, you have other options. We recently lost one of our little goats. We had gotten, you guys, if you've watched, you know that we have 2 Nigerian dwarf does that are about 1.5 years old. And then this year we added a buck and a wether, and then another little doeling. And we lost our doeling to coccidiosis. I feel like we caught it as soon as we could, and we started treating her immediately, but it was too late and we lost her. And you know, when something like that happens, if you're not prepared for it and you don't have really strong convictions on the lifestyle that you're living, it's really easy to just say, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I'm just going to get rid of all of it, and we're just going to go back to buying from the grocery store because I can't deal with that loss. And you know, if you can't, that's fine. But if you know and have really strong convictions of why this is important to you, it's a little bit easier. Yes, it still hurts. It still is awful. We were very sad. I am still very sad when I think about it. And, you know, we've lost baby chicks. We've lost older hens. It's not the same as a goat, and it wouldn't be the same as a cow or a calf or a pig. I mean, I know that everything is different, you know, so maybe you don't lose something that's a larger animal, but maybe a fox gets into your chicken coop, or maybe the neighbor's dog gets in and you lose your entire laying flock and have to start over. That's terrible, regardless of how big or small that chicken flock was. But, you know, without knowing why you want to live this way, without knowing why it's so important, it's hard to get past that. And it's easy to just say, forget it, I'm done, I'm not going to do this anymore. So I would never discourage anybody from living like this. I think this is a fabulous way to live. And of course, there are more things that I want to do and more things that I hopefully will be able to do in the future. But I just want, you know, sometimes you see videos or pictures or channels, you know, a Facebook post where you've got this beautiful picture-perfect garden, you've got the barn and the animals, and yes, at times that's all true, but it's also not easy. It's very hard work, particularly if you are not at a point where you can devote your full time to your homestead. You know, a lot of us are still working full-time jobs, or even just a part-time job, but a lot of us are still having to work to some extent off of our farm. And so you get home from work and you're tired. You still have to feed your animals. You still have to water your animals. You still have to collect your eggs, make sure everybody's safe. Even if it's pouring down rain or it's snowing and it's freezing cold, or it's 112 degrees. They still depend on you to take care of them. I feel like I've kind of gotten off track here, but so just, you know, so this life can be both backbreaking and heartbreaking, but it can also be a really beautiful way to live. And it's, for me at least, it is fulfilling to me in a way that I don't think you can understand unless you live this way and you want to live this way. If you don't want to live this way, it's not going to be fulfilling. It's just going to be hard work that does nothing for you. So I just want to encourage you to make sure that you know why you're doing this. Stay strong in your convictions, because I feel like this is a way of life that is really very much worth living. So, as always, I thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.